Hello, everybody. My name is Amber Daniels, and this is my older adult video presentation. The subject of my interview was a 72-year-old female who was born and raised in Chester, Pennsylvania. She grew up in a time when when racially we were all divided, and it was a major part of her development. So let's begin. Developmental stage for Erikson. The stage that I have worked with my interviewee is stage 5, which is identity versus identity confusion, which is roughly ages 12 to 18. In this stage, adolescents are learning about themselves and developing their sense of identity. Adolescents that are not able to process past this stage may have issues with finding who they are and may experience issues with defining who they are later on in their lives. So what this means is that most adolescents, according to Erikson, are developing their sense of identities. And if their sense of identities are not set by this stage, then they're not able to move on to the next stage, which is stage 6, which is early adulthood. Some important experiences that my interviewee had were she experienced a lot of racism and discrimination. She was a lead singer in a mixed race band at one point and had to overcome the parents walking out during a performance due to her skin color. She had numerous peer groups and was very social despite the racism of the parents of her friends. She was able to keep up with her grades despite the negative views of herself that were portrayed to her by her peers. My interviewee had very high self-esteem and regard for herself, which she attributes was taught to her by her parents, as well as her teachers, as well as some of the interactions that she had with her peers. Challenges and accomplishments. Some accomplishments that she had was that she was popular, but she had issues with her identity due to the fact that the parents of her friends and classmates were racist and discriminated against her because of the color of her skin. She completed high school, even though she was told by her classmates that she could only be a homemaker and would never be anything beyond that. What she wanted to be was a nurse. Teachers were helpful and provided her with an outlet to racism. She had one teacher that she was able to confide many of her concerns and issues in. Adolescent psychosocial crisis. There are 3 crises that I identified from my interviewee. The first one is identifying with her own identity, despite the negative opinions that others had about her. Due to the fact that she lived in an environment where no other people looked like her, she was predominantly 3%, there were predominantly 3% blacks in her high school, and even in her neighborhood, there were less than 3% African American people living in her neighborhood. The ability to move beyond the negative opinions and forming friends and social networks. Being as she was very social with her peers as well as her neighbors, friends, teachers loved her. This was an issue for her due to the fact that many of the people in her environment did not like her because of her skin color. Graduating high school and continuing her education was very important for her, especially since the fact that most of her peers told her she would never be anything but a homemaker or a maid, no jobs such as a nurse or a doctor or a lawyer. Factors that facilitated and inhibited the resolution of the crisis. Biologically, she lived in a nurturing home environment. Her family celebrated her successes. They were warm and loving. Psychologically, she had high self-esteem and regards for herself. She had an innate desire to achieve and prove everybody wrong. Socially, she had good peer interactions with others. She had many positive peer groups. She was involved with Sunday school, the choir. She was involved in the band. She had many friends. According to Gallardo Barraza 2016, academic achievement can be closely related to positive peer acceptance and friendships. I find this to be important because being as she had many interactions with her peers, she was successful and she did go on to become a nurse. Using the systems lens theory. In my person's adolescent life, she had many different systems that were involved in her upbringing. Many of the systems involved in her upbringing were family, church, school, and her peers and friendship relationships. All of the interactions, both positive and negative, helped to shape her personality. As quoted from the interview, I have one trusted teacher who helped me to overcome my issues with racism and discrimination. This was important to her because being as the other teachers liked her, they didn't treat her the same way as they treated all of the other students in her school. This one teacher treated her for who she was. Psychosocial crisis resolution. Another direct quote from my interviewee was, I learned to deal with relationships with people despite the good, bad, and the ugly. This was very important to her because with her high self-esteem, she believed in achieving. Discrimination has been linked to many negative outcomes, such as depression, anxiety, and stress. Dotterer, James, 2018. My interviewee did not inform me that she had many bouts of depression. She did have some anxiety and stress that she overcame by going to church and by interacting with her peers and her family. She had a strong sense of herself as well as her identity. She also described having some feelings of anxiety and anger, but she was able to overcome by relating with her peers and her teachers. Psychosocial crises resolution. Biologically, she was raised as an African American female. She lived in a middle class level family. There were no substance abuse histories. They were born as a Baptist, which is her source of strength in her home. They had plenty of food to eat. They had adequate housing. There were no issues biologically. Psychologically, there were no mental health histories in the immediate family. There were some issues due to racism, but she was able to move through them successfully. Social level. With her peer relationship issues, she had boyfriends and female friendships. Her family did family-oriented outings. She had good relationships with her brothers and her parents. Her family was big and close family with loving, nurturing, and warm family relationships. Psychosocial crisis resolution. Within the interviewee's life, her parents served as the head of her life. She received her boundaries and instructions to function. In her life, her parents were the head and she had to listen to rules and values. They instilled religion and values in the home. My interviewee reported that she did not feel that the religions and values that were instilled in her were bad. She continues to have the same beliefs and goals of her life. The neighborhood school helped to shape who she became. Religion was her first, and racial biases caused her to have a strong sense of well-being because it taught her to love and value herself. Another quote, a small level of racial discrimination can cause black children to have psychological issues in adulthood as well as depressive symptoms, and that experiencing racism can cause self-esteem issues in youth. Summers, Fletcher, Sutton, Roberts, 2017. What this means is that children can have psychological issues in adulthood. Racism can cause these issues, but with your relation to your environment and your strong sense of self can help you to overcome these issues. The ecological theory. The ecological theory works by examining aspects of an individual and the interactions between the individual and their environment. According to Dr. James, 2018, parents moderately have the ability to protect their children from the effects of racism. This can be achieved through nurturing, warmth, and acceptance, which allows them to build their own sense of identity. What this means is that parents can protect their children from the effects of racism. In order to do this, many families like my interview's family used religion, warmth, family outings, parks, took them around people that would instill in them strong sense of values of themselves and their others. She took them around people that were non-African Americans that valued them. This taught her to learn that not all people that are non-African American will treat you as the people that have been treated you, that have been discriminating against you. In neighborhoods, normal racial issues within a neighborhood is important to develop positive racial identities. Rivers, Witherspoon, 2013. But this means that in your environment, if you experience some forms of racism, it teaches you how to deal with racism as you grow through adulthood. Using my interviewee's adolescent stage, the interactions that are most important in her life were her interactions with her family, her church, her school, friendship, and peers. All of these relationships helped to shape her high self-esteem. The interactions that she had with her family and church allowed her to combat the discrimination faced in her life. With these experiences, she learned how to deal with these issues later in her development. She was able to overcome racism and hatred and violence in her older adulthood because she faced them in her childhood, and it caused her to be able to understand and know what she needed to do to overcome them. Throughout the interview, my interviewee told me that she related religion to her strength and values in life. Religion helped her to overcome all of her issues. She also had positive peer interactions with her family and friends. I will continue the next part of this interview in part 2. I hope to see everyone in part 2.